What's up, guys? Welcome to the Walk On Warrior podcast, where we prepare young student athletes for next level success. I am your host, Coach Z. And listen, before we get going, hey, go make sure and subscribe to the Walk On Warrior podcast. That's Walk-on Warrior. And listen, we're dropping episodes every single week. And listen, we got a ton of content coming out. Super excited. We're just getting this thing started. We're just coming out of the gates. And also, in addition to that, allathlete.com. Listen, the All Athlete app is everything that you are going to need as a young student athlete. Listen, whether it's putting in your height, your weight, your transcripts, putting in your highlights, everything in between. Listen, when coaches come knocking at the door, it could be early in recruiting, it could be right in the middle of recruiting, or it could be at the last minute, the 11th hour. Listen, you need to make sure and you have everything, all your ducks in a row. And All Athlete is the best place for that, guys. So definitely go to allathlete.com and download the app, man. Go get it. All right, moving forward. Listen, hey, so Walk On Warrior podcast. Listen, I'm super excited to have our guest on, man. He's lived probably, I would say, 3 lives into one. He's done a lot of great things in the sport of football. And in the game of life, and he's got a great story and super excited to have him on. And without further ado, JT Rogan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Coach C. I, immediately said yes when invited to come on with you. Thrilled to be able to share my story, my journey, hopefully inspire, motivate, guide, direct, help any walk-ons or parents of walk-ons or anyone who can stand to benefit from our shared experience together.
So I always like to start the podcast off with a little icebreaker. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, what can I ask him right off the bat that's going to kind of bend the rules a little bit? And I'm sitting here thinking, oh, this is perfect. So some may know, some may not know, you were with Michigan for a few years. And Michigan, some of the kids always would tell me, was it 16, 17, 18, something in there? Y'all went to you went to Italy, right?
Yeah.
So in your trip to Italy, you went to the Vatican. My question as an icebreaker is, did you get to meet the Pope?
No. Most people don't really know how the papal address goes, but there are like levels to it, and you need to be super duper ultra mega important to even have a shot at meeting the Pope. And so Coach Harbaugh and his wife Sarah were fortunate enough to be able to kind of arrange that, and that even took some wrangling. It wasn't like, hey, I'm the head football coach at Michigan, come to the front. It was like, so we were, I don't even know how far back. It must have been like 100 rows as a team, and then there were probably like 100 rows behind us. So it's hard to have seating for 100 conveniently and easily, but no, I did not get to meet the Pope, and yeah, that's okay.
Well, you think about how many people would love to meet the Pope and just to be, in the Vatican with him there and everything. I think that's a pretty incredible situation, regardless of really who it is. I mean, but the Pope, throughout the world has got to be one of the most well-known figures. So pretty cool to see that. Pretty cool experience, I'm sure. But so let's go ahead. We'll start like this. So give a rundown of your story from you growing up in Coronado to where you are now.
Yeah. So when I was 13 years old, I moved from East County, La Mesa in San Diego to Coronado, and my mom wouldn't let me play football until I moved to Coronado. I'd been beating her up about it, but finally she let me put the pads on, and I played 2 years with Coronado Pop Warner, and kind of really got my bearings about me, but still pretty undersized. I was so small as a freshman. I could have continued to play Pop Warner as an older but lighter, but instead played freshman and JV football. Managed to win JV MVP despite not playing the whole season on JV. I don't know if I was the most deserving candidate, but I won the award. And then my sophomore year at Coronado, was able to start, led the team in rushing yards, receiving yards, and tackles. Junior year, we won the league championship with a win over the number 10 team in the county at the time at Madison. And And then, my senior year ran for over 1,700 yards, had 31 touchdowns in 11 games. Went 9-2, made some great memories with my teammates. Won a game in Canada at Calgary Stampeder Stadium. Won a game in Nevada, which was awesome, against Boulder City. So had great experiences there, but was still really small, right? And did everything I could from a diet and kind of consumption standpoint, because my dad was a chef, and so I lived one block from campus. I would just come home, I'd eat, I'd have enormous breakfasts, but still was just really small. And schools were interested, but I was just a little too small, a little too slow, not your prototypical player, skill player especially. So ultimately ended up not getting any offers when I was coming out of high school.
Yeah. Do you know who Nick Ricarduli is?
Yeah, absolutely. I know Nick and some of the Poway clan up there.
I bring up Nick because, when I think of all three of us, in a sense, we're three guys that were undersized and under recruited because of our size and shape. And when I interviewed Nick, I asked him specifically about that because, me being a coach and me interacting with coaches as well as you, coaches just naturally have a size and shape. They got a box for every position group, kind of to a certain extent. And it's interesting how kids get overlooked because of that. I mean, I think that's, you want the 6'3", 280-pound center, you want the 6'4", 210-pound receiver or whatever. And it's really interesting, how coaches will overlook guys. And like I said, you see the development that happens from a certain time to a certain time. So were you in high school? So you're going through high school and you're in a situation now, you're saying, well, I want to keep playing football, correct? You want to keep playing after high school?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being the case, what's going through your mindset in regards to the process of going from having all these good seasons to moving potentially to the next level? Are you thinking, hey, maybe I'm going to go junior college, maybe I'm going to take one of these lower level offer or whatever it is?
Yeah. So I was looking at junior college for sure. The only coach that really wanted me was Mike Maynard at Redlands at the time. And so many people had great things to say about him that, part of me wishes that I'd have been able to play for him and learn from him. Ultimately it was going to be University of San Diego or a junior college. And I actually turned University of San Diego down. I said, I can't afford it. My dad was laid off after 9/11. Neither one of my parents went to college. Though I live in Coronado, a really wealthy place, we don't have, hardly any money to be able to, certainly afford a $25,000 a year education bill. That was after the grants and whatever awards I'd been given. And so I turned it down, and Coach Harbaugh was able to get the offer, the Office of Financial Aid, to reconsider, and ultimately, make it something that I could afford. But there were no scholarships. I had a little bit of success before my senior year going to some camps, and that kind of helped, the light bulb to turn on. I went to a camp at Stanford where I played really well and, gained some confidence from that. And also went to a B2G camp, which, back in the day, guys like Dennis Dixon and some of the best players in California went to it. And I was, I asked him, I was like, how did you invite me here? Right. I'm a little bit of a fish out of water coming to this camp. It was urban, if you will. And they're like, we keep our ear to the streets.
Yeah.
And so I played well there. And going to these camps is really important because it gives you a sense for how you compare against players from other cities, other states. Prospects were being recruited, right? Like I was on a bus with Evan Moore back to Stanford. Evan was a 5-star caliber recruit. I don't know if he was 5'4", but he ended up, getting offered and going to Stanford and playing in the NFL. And so I was right alongside him. So, when we get to campus, like he's talking to the head coach, Buddy Tevens, and I'm just like sitting next to him, kind of like the tag along there. But, these experiences were all helpful and useful in, helping me to understand what the game looked like and what I needed to do maybe to achieve the level of success that I was looking for.
Yeah. So now, so you're moving forward. So it sounds, so you had a story that I had ran into where, now I could be mixing this up a little bit. So you said you turned down USD originally?
Yeah, just because it didn't make sense financially, and I would
Yeah.
encourage anyone to do that. You don't need to pay, I don't know, $30,000 a year for an education, but
Right. So what's next? So I know that you were very persistent in a
yeah.
situation here. So talk about your persistence because you're an undersized guy. You're not sure where to go. Okay, it's out of my price range. Maybe JC, go to all these camps. Talk about your mindset moving beyond that right there. Persistence and
Yeah,
yeah.
so there were some good players going to USD. Coach Harbaugh played in the NFL. I had a really good friend from Fletcher Hills Little League who's still a friend to this day, Joe Stab, who went to Grossmont High and played safety, who went to USD, and he was working out with the team in the summer. He was on the kind of the 105-man roster that they were allowed to have, and I wasn't. So I was kind of just hanging out. And I came to find out after the fact that people in Coronado kept telling Coach Harbaugh that he needed to take me because he lived in Coronado. I lived in Coronado. People kept bothering him and he still wouldn't take me. But ultimately, he shows up on day one and a couple guys get medically disqualified or decide that they don't want to play anymore. And so a spot becomes available. And I just happened to run into him, like right around the first day of camp. And so a couple days into camp, he ends up contacting me and telling me that I can go out and try out and see if I can be a part of the team. And when it comes to practicing, like I'm going to practice and play as hard as anyone, right? And so I just worked my way up to being like the number 2 running back. I was literally rooming with the starting running back on our first trip, out of the state for a road game that year against Holy Cross. So I worked my way from probably 10th string. I mean, there were 9 running backs. There was Deshaun Benton, and there was Josh Denton, and there was Evan Harney, and there was Brian Beckard, there was Kevin Haran, there was Mark Chonchuli. I mean, these were all teammates of mine who were in front of me when I showed up, right? And so I just kind of bit by bit kept working hard, and maybe a guy got hurt, or I had a good practice, or somebody else changed positions, right? And so I just kept showing up, like Dora, or just or not Dora, Dory, right? Just keep swimming, right? The Disney, Finding Nemo, right? Just keep swimming, and so that's what I did, and ended up having some pretty good success in training camp that freshman year.
Yeah. So talk about the mindset because now you're in a situation where you go to from Coronado, which is a pretty smaller school, right, out there on the island, to go into USD. Now you got to reinvent yourself in front of a whole new group of guys, right? You have to make a name for yourself. What's it like that first day? You're a walk-on. You weren't I was going to say scholarship guy, but you weren't one of the guys that were on that roster or whatever on the war room.
Yeah.
So you're talking to these young student athletes that now they come on campus for the first day. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, do everything as well as you can do it, to the best of your ability, and show up, be accountable, work hard. There are calling cards that will serve you well throughout life, and things that led you to be successful in high school that will help you be successful in college. And so my attitude, my tenacity, all of that, served me well. There are also things, bad habits you develop in high school, right? And so, like, I was really outspoken,
Yeah.
fun, jovial, lighthearted. The seniors didn't want to see any of that. I mean, they
Yeah.
hated me. And the stories that they can tell about me being a scout team running back and just being completely disrespectful in their minds, but in my mind I'm just like, hey, I'm having a good time, I'm working hard, I'm going to be authentically and genuinely me. And that served me well, but it doesn't work that way for everyone. So you got to read the room, but if you keep showing up and you work hard, you start to able to maybe recruit some people to your team and be a little bit more tolerant of shenanigans or over the top behavior like I had.
Well, and the reason I bring that up is because I think there's a major factor with young student athletes that not just go into a school locally, but a lot of kids will get a scholarship and go to Utah or they'll go wherever. And then all of a sudden, within the first few weeks or whatever, it's just they get homesick. The
Yeah.
competition's not what they thought it was. They were the best in high school and they were able to get away with things. They were slackers. They were all the fundamentals, and then all of a sudden they get on this campus, boom, they got fans, they've got these big stadiums, they got a lot of big things in front of them. Now they're an adult. Now they got to go to class. Now they got to get their just all these moving. Now you got to go to weights in the morning. You got to do all these different things. And kids just a lot of times aren't prepared for that. And so you're a very driven guy. Where does that come from?
Part of it is the environment, right? So you choose where you go. I was going to work, going to play for Coach Harbaugh. And he helped to foster that dedication, that commitment, that belief. He did a phenomenal job. Obviously, won the national championship. He'll probably win a Super Bowl before his time on this earth is dead or is gone. But my parents equipped me with a lot of resilience and tenacity, and I'm thankful for that every day. It's a trait that I take with me all the time. And my teammates, they had the motto, if you don't grind, you don't shine. And I continue to live by that every single day. I recognize that if I want something for myself, I need to go out and work and get it and make it happen. And so, it's up to me. And that attitude will serve any athlete going on to a new campus anywhere across the country. It's about doing the work. It's about staying committed and dedicated and not letting the distraction or the noise or the temptation distract you from what you want for yourself, right? You want to become a better athlete. You want to achieve the goals that you have for yourself, and you want to be the best version of yourself. And that's going to require sacrifice, dedication, commitment, and continual work ethic, right? And you've got to prioritize things. It's, do you want to go out with friends? Do you want to go to a concert? Do you want to sleep in, right? Or do you want to get in an extra workout? Do you want to prioritize your food and water intake? Do you want to do the difficult, uncomfortable things, both small and big, on a regular basis, to make yourself, the caliber of football player that you need to be. And I'll share one example. I had weaknesses for, temptation, and that was hanging out with my friends. It was going to the beach. I loved going to Del Mar when I was an 18, 19-year-old in the thoroughbred club, and betting on horses, and like I loved it, right? It was like such a good time. And I would, such a good time. And so all of these things, right? And the girls and the friends and the Padre games, and it's like so much stuff. Eventually, after 2 seasons and 2 summers, I'm like, I can't stay here another summer. I am too distracted. So I went up to a place where I knew no one, where I had a relative live in Northern California. I just did the work. I worked construction every day. I walked myself to the BART, the train station, worked at the Oakland Coliseum, took the BART home, worked out every evening, and put that thing on repeat for about 2.5 months. Came back to school, stronger, bigger, more disciplined, and that was really a platform for me to continue to grow myself as an athlete.
Yeah. Now, through your years of being on college campuses, do you have any stories of, anything that stands out as far as student athletes where it did go the wrong direction?
Yeah, absolutely. There are student athletes, mostly who prioritize the biggest distractions, right? Girls, drugs, alcohol. Um, I had a teammate who ended up losing a year of eligibility because we had a really strict marijuana policy at the time, which, I think now we look back and maybe that, wasn't the best policy, but the rules were the rules. And so everybody has to abide by them. And I was at Stanford and I was at Michigan. And so, especially Michigan, we had some phenomenally gifted players, right? And guys who either hurt their draft stock or didn't get drafted because of character issues that came from um, their lack of willingness to do the work. And in some cases, it resulted in a failed drug test. In other cases, it was just the habitual neglect of doing the things that just a regular player needed to do. Like if you just showed up and did all the workouts, went to all the practices, made all the meetings, that would be sufficient. But when you're, kind of looking for an excuse, taking practices off, not fully competing, well, then that word gets back to NFL scouts because, the program's not going to say great things about everyone. There has to be a hierarchy of players that are worth taking. And, and some of these players made the road to the NFL much more difficult. And then in a couple cases, their career in the NFL was short-lived because they didn't build up the goodwill and the trust and the belief that a team will have in you. The higher they draft you, the more money they invest in you, and the better your track record is with your college coaches.
Well, that's something that goes with you. Obviously, we talk about transcripts and how that follows you, but your reputation follows you too, right? Because when you go from high school, your reputation goes to college, college goes to the NFL if you so have that opportunity to go that direction. And that can really cost you. And we talk about grades all the time and how important that is, but there's certain things, and this is a great thing to bring out, but there's certain things about your career, not just on the field, but off the field, your character that follows you all the way through. And like I said, a lot of the student athletes that I deal with, they're kind of behind the game. So talk about just when it comes to that kind of thing, but talk about what we were just mentioning in regards to now you have all these distractions. What's a couple pieces of advice to stay away from that, or how to stay away from that?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have a really good teammate who was more disciplined than I was. And, if you can just, I was talking to some players and coaches the other day, and I said, if you are the smartest, wealthiest, best looking person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? You need to be people need to be challenging you and pushing you, right? You should be the dumbest, ugliest, poorest person in the room, right? You need to be having other people bringing you up, bringing you with them, learning from them, what made them successful. And so, I was, I found a guy, who ended up being a great friend, the best man at my wedding, John Matthews, who ended up going to the NFL. He was always a little bit stronger and a little bit faster than I was. And in some cases, he was a lot stronger and a lot faster. But, in some exercises, some drills, a little bit stronger, a little bit faster. And that motivated me. Right. And I mimicked his habits, and I went with him and did what he did, and learned a lot and improved a lot. And then, I think what you really need to understand is, while you've got these coaches and you've got trainers, everybody's got specific responsibilities, and everybody has a specific limited frame of reference. Coach Harbaugh's frame of reference was the NFL. Like he hadn't been a college walk-on ever, so he had no idea what he was getting into as a college coach, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But your trainers know what they know. Carolyn Greer had been there for 20 years, and she knew USD inside and out, but she didn't know everything that everyone knew in the training profession. And so I like to say, and she was a great trainer for us, but you can get resources that can expand your knowledge and expand your understanding and appreciation of the game. So don't just think that the best people in the world are where you're at, right? USD was maybe one of the best places for coaching. When I was there, Jack Harbaugh, Dave Adolph was a former NFL defensive coordinator. Obviously, Coach Harbaugh. We had tons of great coaches, but maybe we didn't have great facilities, right? Maybe our weight room wasn't what it could have been, right? And so there are other better weight rooms with other better devices, or maybe there were better strength and conditioning coaches, right? So you're smart enough to live by design and not live by default. Don't just wake up and drink coffee because that's what everyone does, right? Like wake up and drink water, right? Like, even though McDonald's says over 1 billion served, like maybe you should get yourself some fresher, healthier, vegetables and food that's, not so, processed and chemically filled, right? So like, think about what you need to do for yourself, and like, man, God, my body's 70% water. Maybe I need to drink more water, but my urine's always yellow, right? Like you're smart enough to know what you need to do. So just, you've got Google, you've got us, right? I mean, share my contact information. If anybody's, desperate, needs guidance, needs help, I am more than happy to offer it.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, going from high school to the Division 1, right? I mean, whether it's non-scholarship or not, you're still playing at a pretty high level. And there's certain things that you have to do to not only stay at that level, but maybe go beyond that level, right? And what kind of characteristics would you say now that a student athlete is at that level? What would you say that because there's certain traits that follow kids or student athletes or high-level athletes? Not just the 80%, but going and being the 10%, that top 10%. And obviously, when you guys were playing, you guys played at a high level. And obviously, you've been around the high levels and everything. What are some characteristics that you would say are probably what makes somebody the best, and what made you as good as you were?
I think if you can zoom out a little bit, right, and understand that you have 4 or 5 years to achieve the best version of yourself, you can defy a lot of the stereotypes, right? And you can live by design. Like people say you can't teach speed. And if I just would have believed that and taken that as gospel, then, I wouldn't have achieved the success that I achieved. Instead, I ran in track spikes for the first time ever when I was 21 years old, right? I worked on getting my central nervous system to move as fast as possible while accelerating my body forward so that I could understand what, peak speed looked like. And I worked on building that with a track coach in the off season. And so you can keep doing the work, right? And I think that my speed was a limitation, and then my upper body strength was a limitation. I came into USD, probably benching 185 pounds, and I wasn't good at it, so I didn't do it all that much, right? I'm like, oh, whoever needs to lay on their back and bench press 225 pounds off of their chest, right? I'd make excuses for it. But when you have a hole in your game, it can be debilitating or frustrating or disappointing, or it can haunt you, right? Like, especially if it's speed or, if it's upper body strength. And so, like, I had really good lower body strength, really good core. But as I eliminated weaknesses, I got better speed, I got better upper body strength. It ended up fueling my commitment, my intensity, my work ethic. And so everybody's strength is always going to get stronger, right? If you're a great jumper, you're never not going to be a great jumper, right? You're going to work on that. That's going to be what you do. Or if you're, really strong legs, like you're never going to like skip leg day because you're like, wow, I'm going to crush this. I know let's do this. So, I eliminated the weaknesses. My strengths got stronger. And then I really just had an insatiable appetite for work. I had days in the summer leading up to my 5th year where I ran, I swam, and I lifted, right? I probably overworked. And for 3.5 weeks leading up to training camp, I worked out every day. And again, I think I overworked out, but I was so on fire for what I knew I was capable of being at that point that I wanted to get in as much work as I could because I had done the work through 4 years to get to where I wanted to be to earn All American status, that you know, I wasn't going to let that opportunity pass me by to be as good as I could possibly be at that moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you said 4 to 5 years, because I think some kids don't really think in terms of the future. So when a kid does have that opportunity to play at the next level, they think of it as ESPN in front of the crowds and all that. They're not thinking about what's going on off the field and what you got to do, not only maintain your athletic ability, but to go above and beyond. But they also don't realize that there's 4 to 5 years of absolute grind, whether it's in season, off season, out of season, however you put it, and the importance of that, because you'll see the difference. We're talking about, the 80% versus that 10%. And in my opinion, the 10% will obviously put that work in the off season, not just, doing the spring football, whatever, but when nobody's looking, doing that summer work, and also taking classes in the summer. But most guys don't understand they have to be patient. And talk a little bit about that. Talk about, for these young student athletes, talk about patience and how important that is.
I think it's fair to say that if you look at the amount of progress and growth that a high school freshman experiences between their high school freshman year and their high school senior year, you are capable of making a similar amount of progress from your college freshman year to your college senior year. Now, obviously, you don't have the benefit of puberty, but my quarterback grew 4 inches. The SEC basketball player of the year, Dalton Connect, he grew, I think, another 5 inches between graduating and his sophomore year in college. And so you can still grow. You can obviously gain weight. You can get faster. You can make a lot of really big improvements. And so what you don't have in high school is you don't necessarily have great competition all the time. You probably have a average at best strength conditioning program, right? You don't have the best coaches. You don't play a lot of great games. You don't have spring football. There are certain limits there. But if you go to college, I mean, you've got spring football, you've got fall, you've got, summer workouts, you've got winter conditioning, you've got, hopefully you've got some sort of, meal training table, right? The schools can now give you as much food as you want. Like there are so many more resources, right? And so for me, when I was able to get all of that extra resource and the great coaching and the access to the strength and conditioning and the speed work and all of that, it allowed me to ascend because I had the work ethic, I had the grit, I had the grind, I had the commitment to becoming a great player. But then when you fuel that with, I went against NFL caliber competition all the time. Eric Bakhtiari, was in the NFL for 4 or 5 years. I'm going to his wedding here coming up in a couple of weeks. His brother David was a tackle for a decade with the Packers, right? Like I had to block him, right? I mean, he was 100 pounds bigger than I was. You know, that's great. That's great practice, right? You're not going to get that in high school typically, right? And so the patience that you talked about really is not for anything other than just not having destination addiction. Like be patient with the process of continual improvement, of doing the right things, and the payoff will happen down the road. But you can't be so obsessed about, being 200 pounds or running a 4.5. You need to be obsessed with doing the work as well as you can do it. And then the results will take care of themselves. The final thing I'll say about this whole thing about being patient is that nobody grows up trying to be the best college football player ever. Nobody's ever like, oh, it's the college football playoff quarterfinal and I'm going to catch the game winning pass. No, it's NFL, right? It's like I'm a pro player. I'm playing for my local team. I'm winning the Super Bowl, and I'm in Madden, 2042, right? Like that's the goal. The goal is to be the best you can possibly be and be the best player ever, not to be a player who plays really good in college and then flames out or just flatlines or, hopefully doesn't go in the opposite direction, right? So play the long game, right? Be committed to being the best that you can be every single day. And you'll be able to look back after a few years and really be pleased with your progress, and then continue to invest from there.
Well, when I think of patience, the word patience, it leads me into the word ego, because you have a lot of kids, especially at the highest level, the 5-star, 4-star, 3-star kids that create this ego because they were so good in high school. Everybody's telling them they're good. They've got the stars. They've got the I'm blessed to receive on Twitter. You know what I'm saying? Which is, it's just the reality. Everybody's blessed to receive a scholar or whatever they consider it. Kids are kids. But to be patient, you're going to go through some challenges, right? You're going to overcome a lot. So with that being the case, you have to push aside your ego. You got to be humble. So when you were going through, situations at USD, your career, for you to be patient, were there some things that really knocked your ego down if you had an ego going through the whole process?
Yeah, the whole time. I mean, setbacks are going to happen.
Yeah.
Negative thinking happens to 100% of people. It's just up to you how long you want to allow that to live in your mind. And some people let it live a lifetime, right? They're just negative people and they always look at things through a negative lens. And most of those people aren't very successful. And you certainly don't want to surround yourself with them. But, I get to second string my first year, and then we get to spring football. And I'm like, I've never done spring football before. We don't have a game for 6 months. This sucks. Coach Harbaugh's like, good news. Like I just, talked with the conference and we get 3 more practices. Like we've been under practicing as a conference. And I'm like, this is not good news. This is not good news. And so I was like, screw this. He's like, yeah, and these things all happen together, but I'm like, yeah, it's kind of negative, right? I'm like, God, this is brutal. And then a few days later, he's, we're in the middle of practice. He doesn't even look at me. He says, I got 4 guys better than you, and I'm like, oh God, I'm 5th string right now, and so that happens, right? Every year he would bring in more running backs from more schools. We had running backs from Hawaii, Boise State, Colorado State, and certainly a few others. But those are 3 main ones that stick out that he brought in to try and make our team better. And you certainly could say they were trying to take my job or take reps off of my plate. And they were all great players. But that's That's like, okay, hey, I got to check back in for work, right? I got to keep going. I got to keep grinding. I need to, do the things that it takes to be successful. And so, there were, all sorts of setbacks. I mean, 25 carries for 62 yards against Princeton. Like, I didn't feel great about that. 10 carries for 7 yards against Monmouth in the 2006, PFL NEC championship. Didn't feel great about that. Right. So these are setbacks, right? These are bad games that, I can choose to wallow on, or I can let that be the fuel to power my work going forward.
Yeah. So with that being the case, so you're going into USD the size and shape that you were. I know I'm kind of going back a little bit, but this kind of just comes to my mind is when you're going through your process and you're going into USD and you're going through all these challenges, did you have naysayers? Did you have people that were like, you know what, dude, this isn't for you? We know it, or that kind of stuff come up by anybody?
Yeah. I,
Too small.
yeah, most of the time it came to me secondhand because nobody ever wants to, tell me that I'm not good enough. Right. But, they just figure that if you don't get offered a scholarship, then you're not good enough. You're not made for it. Right. People are like, maybe you should play baseball. The basketball coach is like, you're not going to win senior athlete of the year if you don't play basketball. Just a lot of people telling me how to live my life. And yeah, and plenty of naysayers, right? People who think that, their rear view mirror can be my windshield, right? Like what they saw in the past is going to be what I'm seeing going forward. And that just wasn't the case. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I never felt uncomfortable on a football field. I always felt like I had, just an innate ability to play the game. And, and once I stopped being my own biggest naysayer, that's when my career took off. People would ask me what I wanted to do after college. And I'd say, well, I want to see if I can play professional football. And then people would be like, white running back, and so I diminished my own greatness, my light in that moment. And other people were obviously helping to put that out. And now how big of an idiot do I feel like with Christian McCaffrey arguably being the best running back in all of football, right? That could have been me. Or
Yeah.
even as I was graduating, Danny Woodhead, right? So everybody's going to tell you, a president can't be black or a running back can't be white or, whatever these, racial stereotypes or limiting beliefs are that other people have, and this brings me to another one. And sorry for this to be a tangent, but people
Yeah.
say, hey, make sure you've got a plan B, right? Don't make football your plan A. Well, if your plan B is to like work construction and then your plan C is to be a banker and your plan D is to, try and be a, you know, you know, a nurse practitioner, something like all of those things are similar, right? Your plan B, C, D, E, F, and G are all similar. And the person telling you to have a plan B is on their plan B. They don't have a plan A that's as good as your plan A. And if your plan A is being a professional football player, then water that plant as well as you can water it, because the effort that you commit and dedicate to that will show you more about yourself than you could possibly have. And the people who tell you to focus on having a plan B, again, probably never had a plan A as good as yours. So I'm just not really a believer in, the backup plan. The backup plan is going to be there. It's going to be whatever it's going to be, but I love really chasing your dream and going after what it is that you want for yourself. Because even if you don't get it, like I didn't get to play professional football like I wanted to because of a devastating knee injury my 5th year, still learned a ton about myself, and it ended up changing my life for the better. And I wouldn't change it after the fact. Now I know what I know versus, what I thought I wanted for myself back then.
That's really good, JT. And I mean, I tell this story over and over again, especially with young recruits, but it's like, so I grew up in a real small town in Oregon. I mean, in the sticks. And as well as I do, if you're far enough away and you play, in a small school, whatever, it's hard for those schools just geographically, they just don't want to come and recruit you. I mean, yeah, there's some guys here and there that if you're good enough, yeah, they'll go out of their way. But come on, I was a running back as well. And, all that you said was true. And my dream was to go play University of Oregon. And I didn't get a phone call. I didn't get nothing. Didn't get anything, man. You talk about just kill you. But anyway, long story short, I just said, you know what? This is what I want to do. I'm going to play at the next level. And if I do that, I'm going to go to the highest level I can. If I walk through the door and then all of a sudden they tell me get the heck out, then I'm okay. And then I'll just try again, whatever. Funny thing on top of that is I went into for spring. So I actually had to go and do an actual tryout. Literal. I don't know if they did it in Michigan or wherever, but try out. And this was at Utah State, and it was in the wintertime. And if you've ever been to, northern Utah in the wintertime, it's cold, man. And so there's about 80 guys. I thought when I went in and talked to the recruiting coordinator, it was like, yeah, it'd just be you. Dude, I went into the practice facility. There had to have been 80 plus people in there. And so I'm like, oh my God. But, I had that mentality. It was like, you know what? I'm just going to fall on my shield if I have to. So, but out of all those guys, they ended up taking one. And that was me. And it gets even better. It's pretty funny, man, because we're talking about just getting onto a campus for the first time and being intimidated. I just really wasn't, because I already kind of accomplished a lot going from, the Northwest all the way over to Utah. And so there was 6 running backs in front of me, and all 6 of them, we had a new staff come in. Shout out Coach Guy. He's not there anymore, but their whole staff came in and they said, listen, we're going to toughen these guys up. They had a poor, last 4 years. We're going to toughen these guys up. Bro, we had 6 running backs get hurt within the first practice. And they're like, hey, my running back coach is Chris Tabor. I don't know if it's Chris Tabor, but he was the head guy over at, was it Carolina, I think, last year or something. Anyway, interim guy. But anyway, he just looks around. He's like, do we have any more backs? And just before I went to raise my hand, I had a couple guys push me forward. And sure enough, hey, just so you know, we're running the ball. And I'm like, Coach, which way are we going? I don't care. Just tell me which way. Go right, boom, 15, 20. Dude, let's do it again, 15, 20. So it's really, when we're talking about our 2 stories, it's one of those things where, it's a mindset and it's being fearless too. But also once you get to that point, being patient, having no ego, because a lot of those guys in front of me, they were guys that were, coming from situations of 4 or 5 stars. And their egos, man, would totally get. One kid was from Miami. He trying to play Miami in Logan, Utah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, but me coming through that, we're talking about naysayers. My whole town was like, nobody gets out of here. Are you kidding me? There's no way you're going to make it. And I just had one of those attitudes. It's like, yeah, I am. Are you kidding me? I'm going to do something that nobody else has done. And, so that's just, for my situation too, it's really interesting how guys will fail because they're like, you know what, maybe they are right. I'm not going to listen to them, or I'm going to listen to those guys. I'm going to go work at the tire barn and now my dreams. And then you run into those people, however many years after that, and they say, oh, I should have done it or whatever. And, that's one thing I don't want to see with the young guys that I run into.
Yeah. Nobody regrets playing football longer, from what I've experienced, right? A lot of people regret quitting or hanging it up. And there is a burden and an obligation and an expectation that comes with, stars. And, back in the day, there was an old Fresno State coach, he was up watching the practice in his tower, and he yells at a player with his megaphone, you're a liar and a thief. You're a liar because you said you could play, and you're a thief because you're stealing the scholarship money. That can cut you down pretty nicely. And then if if you're getting NIL payments, or if you're a bust or not living up to whatever your recruiting hype was, people are going to chirp at you and chime in on social media. And, you've got to have thick skin, and you got to stay committed to, your vision for yourself and trying to achieve, your highest level and skill demonstration possible.
Yeah. So another thing with your career at USD, and I want to talk about overcoming some challenges. And I know that now you're all in, you're dedicated, you're doing what you're doing, you're getting success, and you ended up having a knee injury. And I think a lot of guys think that they're invincible. and they don't realize that there is a possibility of things happening. This is an aggressive sport and whatever. Some get injured, some don't. But for those that get injured, what would you say to these guys that are not just injuries, but just overcoming a death in the family, or just overcoming those hard challenges, man, that you deal with?
Yeah, it's adversity introduces a man to himself, is what Albert Einstein said. And I think that, it's great. Even looking at the body, you've got to break down your muscle to build it back up. You need micro tears in your muscles for them to regrow and rebuild even stronger, right? That's how muscular growth happens. And so you have to have the setbacks, you have to have the trials and the tribulations. Um, you have to fail before you succeed, right? You're not going to be able to do everything that you want to do the first time that you try to do it. That's just not how life works. And so, you get an injury, you get something that sets you back. It's going to allow you to develop more resiliency. It's going to give you, the ability to develop a new and different, better way um, to be a different person and a better version of yourself. I had a really difficult knee injury, and I had to have multiple knee surgeries on it. It was a microfracture of lateral femoral condyle on the tibial plateau, which is of the left knee, which is the same microfracture that Kobe Bryant had in his 18th season. Microfracture ends a lot of basketball careers, some football careers too. It's just hard. It's a really difficult, it's ACL, MCL. For me, it was medial and lateral meniscus both. And so there were people doubting that my medical recovery would happen. There were people rightfully doubting that I would even get another year of eligibility because I had taken 5 years to play for. Um, but I just kept working. Everybody doubted, whether I could make a compelling enough case to win over the NCAA to get my year back. Having to get a surgery in September and then another one in January and then be ready for the season in August.
Ooh.
I mean, they literally allowed me to play defense and run down on special teams because they didn't think I would be, very useful, right? And that was just what they thought. And I was a backup running back to start the season. I ended the season as the MVP. So, they just doubted me again, and that's okay, right? I don't, I don't care. It doesn't matter, right? Because I'm here for the work, right? Like that's what I'm doing. And I was talking to, again, some players and coaches this past week. I said, yeah, I interviewed Kirk Gibson, who had a walk-off home run in the 1988 World Series against the Oakland Athletics, one of the greatest, sports moments of all time, certainly for the city of Los Angeles. And I said, and that was one of 3 podcasts I did, audio and video. I was the only person, and I recorded the other 2. One was with a sleep doctor who does sleep programming for the Washington Nationals on their World Series run, and the other one was the CEO of Ford Motor Company, an enormous blue chip. Yeah. So it's like, just do the work, right? Like nobody cares, right? Like just keep working, right? And so, that mindset and that mentality, if you don't grind, you don't shine, is just it served me so well ever since I stepped foot on the USD campus. And, I remain as committed to it now as I ever have been.
Yeah. So you were talking about how you had some pretty good folks around you to look up to. When you got a little bit older, when you started crossing over that junior and senior plateau and you started running into a lot of these younger guys, did you see yourself in that role eventually?
Yeah, and you have to treat them all differently, right? I tried to build up the other running backs as much as possible. Whenever I could, I took myself out or asked not to go back in because I wanted to see the other running backs play. I enjoyed it selfishly, and then I also knew that they had friends that wanted to see them get time. So, that was always a decision. And for a while, we had a pretty nice NFL pipeline. My class, we sent a few guys to NFL camps, and a few guys actually made NFL rosters. Josh Johnson's still in the NFL. My quarterback in college is, backing up Lamar Jackson for the Ravens right now. So, it's incredible what we were able to achieve with 0 scholarship offers just because we kept working hard and we had good coaches and we did the work and we didn't make excuses. for one another, and all the things that sound cliche and old timey. It worked for us. It works for Coach Harbaugh. You just do the work and you keep working, and ultimately good things happen.
Well, and that's interesting you bring that up too, and that's a really good point. And the first thing that comes to my mind is just foundation and building the fundamentals. And I think that we get so technological and we get so analytical and all these different things, and we kind of forget about the basics of what this sport is about, or just sports in general, and how we get better, as opposed to going two steps forward and then having to go, steps back and forth and back, as being patient, slowly moving forward, working together, those little things. And that's what I admire the most about Coach Harbaugh, is that, he's just a simple guy for the most part. I don't know him personally, but you can tell that just the way that he interacts with a lot of the players. I mean, I've ran into coaches that have coached with him, Shaw and those guys, and it's just fundamentals. It's just basics. And
Yeah.
guys,
I mean, if you think about building a good football player or building a good football position group or building a good team, like there are steps, right? And the steps might look different, but you can't really avoid any steps. It's like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Like if you take the lid off, but you don't have a utensil, it's going to be a lot harder and it's not going to turn out very good. You can do it, but if you don't have a knife or a fork and you got to use your hand, right? It's gonna be a pretty mangled and gnarly PB&J sandwich. And so, but if you do it with discipline and you take the long way, you're going to end up with a pretty good product, right? And it might not be perfect, but it's going to be, typically much better than if you take the short way. And today's generation is more concerned with stars, D1 bound, destination addiction, the result, the outcome. And people talk about falling in love with the process. I think Joel Embiid even calls himself the process. And respectfully, I think he's full of it, because you're a 7-footer, you're doing load management, your process is not my process, brother. You've been like the best player for a
yeah,
while, and I know that, he had to grow into his body, and, but you go to Kansas, right? Like you haven't had the adversity and the trials and tribulations that, might limit lesser people, right? Like truly being involved in the process and building something and having a solid foundation, so that when you really want to, make an addition to your house, right? You want to, improve it and build upon it. You've got a solid bedrock that's going to allow you to do something special.
yeah. With that said, talk about one thing that I really like to hammer home is making the best of opportunities. Talk a little bit about that, not just on the field, but opportunities that maybe you've had off the field, whether it's a job, whether you're in college, or around that time period. Because obviously, you're going to have some opportunities outside of that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But talk about opportunities and being ready and making the best of those whenever that time comes as
Yeah,
an athlete.
I would just say this, there's never a bad time to do a good job, right? And I got offered a job um a couple weeks ago, 6-figure job, um by someone who I hadn't talked to in 7 years, because he had one good interaction over the course of a couple weeks with me. Um you can leave a lasting impression that way, and you can, profoundly impact people in, one instance or one meeting or, series of meetings. And so, as an athlete, the regret that I had was that I didn't take it serious enough about being good enough soon enough. Wasn't serious about it as early as I should have been. And really what happened was, my first year I redshirted, and I was like, well, this is kind of like whatever, right? Obviously I fell to fifth string, didn't really love spring practice. And then here comes another opportunity for me to prepare to get ready for the next season. And guess what? I stayed in San Diego, showed up to some of the team workouts, still a redshirt freshman, a lot of older guys on the team. I could just blend in and not do anything, and nobody would really think anything of it. And then, like 2 weeks before the season starts, the returning starter, PFL player of the year, the running back in front of me falls down a hill and fractures his skull. Never plays again, right? He had like 1,400 rushing yards the year prior. And we needed to fill that void. Now, all of a sudden, here comes me, like JT Rogan, who'd gained 3 pounds in a year, right? Went from 172 to 175, just probably because of mom, dad, and God, not anything I had done. And, and now I'm like, okay, great. Here goes nothing. And, it was not a great feeling knowing that I had let myself down and I'd let my team down. And I didn't hate myself for it or anything like that, but I just came to regret not doing more work sooner. And then the better I got later on in my career, I was like, man, I could have been better even sooner than this if I actually would have taken it seriously. So, there's tons of opportunities that come from being a good player. Some of that's NIL, some of that is, representing your team at different functions or, on student athlete advisory councils or committees, and just being a face for the program across the campus or wherever you're at. There's plenty of good things that come from being a good person, a good player, a good teammate. For me, that was, I got the opportunity to coach at Stanford. I got the opportunity to work for Coach Harbaugh at Michigan. He gave me a tryout with the 49ers. I mean, I co-hosted a podcast with him. I mean, there's like a ton of things that came from working hard and being a good football player and then reinforcing that each time I was given the opportunity to work with him. And so, that is a blessing that, I can continue to work diligently to create opportunities for myself that are byproducts of the hard work that I do.
Yeah. So one thing that always, like I mentioned earlier, it follows you everywhere you go as far as you being a student athlete, your grades. So your transcript. So were you a good student at all? Were you pretty good in school?
Yeah, school came to me easily. And the better grades you have, the more opportunities you have is really what it comes down to. And so, if you're a great athlete and a terrible student, like you might not have any opportunities beyond junior college, perhaps NAIA. If you're a bad athlete and a great student, you might not have any opportunities to play. But the better athlete you are and the better student you are, the more opportunities are available to you. And so my unweighted GPA was like 3.7 coming out of Coronado. So, good,
Yeah.
just not quite good enough for the Ivy Leagues to say yes. So I just missed out on that. And then in college, I did a decent job. I maintained about a 3.0. One semester one season, I was, all academic, first team for the Pioneer Football League that we played in. Um, I would say in high school, it's important because it creates opportunities for you in college. In college, it's just not really all that important, right? If you want to graduate summa cum laude or magna cum laude and near the top of your class or at the top of your class, that's fine. But for the most part, nobody cares about your GPA in college, right? You just have to be eligible, and it makes sense to do a good job. And the coaches do have rewards and benefits built into their contracts sometimes for the GPA, of the team or the graduation academic progress rate, as they call it. So, they might be incentivized to have you do better. And so you don't want to be on the wrong side of those conversations or have to give up more of your time because, you've got to go to study hall to try and get your grades up. So, at the very least, if you can maintain, a B average in college and, an A minus or B plus average in high school, you're just going to generally do all right for yourself. But, if it starts slipping, you create unnecessary hassle and difficulty for yourself that's avoidable in most cases.
JT, the requirements to be eligible for the NCAA academically, at least when I was coming through,
yeah,
dude,
you'd have a pulse. Yeah,
it's I don't even. It's like you. All you got to do is just show up. I mean, you turn some stuff in here and there. I mean, you're gonna pass. It's crazy, man. Because we'd always have guys on academic probation and all these different things. And they're like, yeah, I don't care. Whatever. I'm going to make it. I'm going to get past. And they're going to push. It's just like, it's wild. But So let's fast forward to you from the coach's standpoint. So now you're a coach. Now you're seeing it from a different point of view, whether you're a coach or you're working for Stanford or whatever. So we can stay on that topic. So when you're recruiting somebody, or when a school is recruiting, when we're talking about specifics about a kid, so with all athlete, shout out all athlete, think about when coaches are coming to recruit a kid, talk about some very important things that they're looking for, as far as, because at a certain point, I mean, if they're coming to see you, most of the time they've already kind of gotten an idea of who you are. They've watched your film, or they've seen you in person. There's the rumors about JT, whatever. Talk about some specifics away from just the athleticism that a coach is looking for in a student athlete.
Yeah, a lot of times they want multi-sport athletes, right? They want to know that you're developing other movement patterns or challenging yourself, getting other coaching inputs. That's depending on what position you play. That could be wrestling, it could be track and field, it could be volleyball, basketball. A lot of that's really useful. And football is the one sport where the evaluations happen, at the same time as both teams are playing, right? Like college football and high school football, they can't be at your games for the most part. Like basketball, college basketball coaches go to travel tournaments all the time. College baseball coaches go to travel tournaments all the time, because the club and the AAU is where those sports are being evaluated. But in football, it's kind of the last sport where your high school team is the most important team, because you just can't play padded club football typically in most places across the country. So, elite athleticism is super valuable, right? Like collegiate caliber traits, right? Are you super fast? Are you super strong? Are you physical? Do you move well? Those are things that coaches all look for. But when they go on campus, they want to know, are you a good person? Are you a good teammate? Are you reliable? Are you showing up on time? Do you treat people well with respect? It's cliche, but I interviewed 70 coaches across 25 sports, and overwhelmingly they all said it, right? I mean, not every single one of them, but they're like, we watch their body language. What do they look like when they're coming off the field? How do they talk to their teammates? What do they do when they're, they don't have the ball, right? And so if you're a wide receiver who has a lazy stance and then who jogs their route when they know it's a run play and the ball's not coming to them, it shows up, and that there's no avoiding that. And that certainly can follow you, for a long time, right? A reputation as not being a great teammate, not taking coaching, not challenging yourself. Those are all hallmarks of people that are mediocre players.
Yeah, and that's a real interesting point, because I think kids, especially when they don't have a lot of guidance and a lot of mentorship, they're going by what they hear from somebody that has either gone through it back in the day or whatever. This is what you need to do. And so I think there's certain specific things that they obviously need to know. You got to have knowledge going into this thing if this is the dream of yours. And if you don't check some of those boxes, I mean, you're going to put yourself in somewhat of a detriment. And it could be a situation where you do lose a scholarship or an opportunity or whatever. So from a walk-on stand, say a kid is not getting, so we're talking about recruiting here, but let's talk about a kid that all of his friends are getting offers. They're blessed to receive getting an offer. They're moving on. They're going here. They're going signing dates. What about that kid that's left out? He's getting a little bit of conversation, whatever. I bring this up because, when I talk to coaches too, I bring this up in a sense that it's important that you do well, in film and things like that. And you always want to make good impressions, like we talked about, because when it gets late in the game and you're not really getting much, now with the landscape as it is with the portal, those exit interviews, kid flunks out, there's those little opportunities that could possibly present themselves to, get a preferred or get a walk-on situation. Talk to that kid that's feeling left out, right?
Yeah. I mean, all you need is an opportunity, right? a great example that we have from University of San Diego is Dalton Kincaid. He was a little late to play football in high school, so didn't really go through the whole recruiting scene, and was still developing and growing into his body, and came to USD for 2 years, played really well, transferred to University of Utah, played really well there, ended up turning down significant offers to transfer out of Utah to get into the portal, and got drafted in the first round by the Buffalo Bills and had a really good year last year. And so, you don't have to have a scholarship offer anywhere to achieve success. And so the opportunity to play is important, and not just any opportunity. I think a lot of people are just happy to take whatever comes to them, or they'll go to the community college that's closest to you, right? Like Grossmont College has been, a powerhouse historically in San Diego, in the community college ranks. Well, if you live in Chula Vista, you're probably going to want to go to Southwestern. But if Southwestern isn't as good as Grossmont, is that the best option for you if you are really dedicated to being a football player? Is it worth driving 25 minutes extra each way to get a better football experience with better coaches, against better teammates, winning more games, playing more high level caliber football than you would otherwise? And I don't know what the community college scene looks like in San Diego, but when I was around, that's what it was, right? Grossmont was the gold standard. And so I encourage you to think strategically about what the opportunity is, right? If you're not getting the love, you're not blessed to receive, you're not getting any of these offers, well, where's the best place for you to go to be successful? It might be staying really close to home, because you might need to play with your teammates. You might need to mature more. You might need access to your gym because, the athletic training facility is deficient wherever you're at, or you like working out with your trainer, or whatever the excuse is, right? But you need to think about the conditions that you're putting yourself in to achieve the level of football growth that you're looking for, and that you want, and that you need. And so people will gravitate to brands, or they'll gravitate to D1, or, Power Five or Power Four, or whatever it is, right? But is that what's best for you? Are you going to get the best competition? Are you going to get the best coaches? Are the coaches even going to be there in a year, or 2 years, or 3 years, right? Mike Maynard, who I mentioned earlier, was at Redlands for a long time, right? And so you knew you were going to go there, and you were going to get, a great man leading you, for, likely for your entire career there. And so there's lots to consider. So don't just jump at the opportunity, or just go to the nearest community college or JUCO because, you feel like that's, what's easiest, right? Do what's best. Don't do what's easiest.
Yeah. Well, and the slogan, the motto is, here at Walk On Warrior, we prepare young student athletes for next level success. So when we talk, because you mentioned success, and it's like where you can see the most success, that's the direction that you obviously want to go. So how do you define success? Because you got to be able to see down the road a little bit, right? To see where you can be the most successful, or where you think you can be the most successful. How would you define success, or what you think as a young student athlete success could be or look like?
I mean, I had this conversation today with a 3-star basketball player and his dad. Where are they? What college programs are developing talent, right? Where are you seeing players go to the NFL, the NBA, in case of the college basketball player or future college basketball player I was talking about, right? Who's churning out good people? Who's churning out good players? Who is winning football games? Who is developing their athletes? Who has, a good coaching staff with a good roster, who's been successful with body types like yours, and athletes from your school, right? They're the Vince Young national championship team for the Texas Longhorns that beat USC. 21 of their 22 players were from Texas, right? Of their starters. So if you were, desperately wanting to be a Texas Longhorn at that point, it was going to be pretty tough, right? So be aware of what a good environment is for you to achieve success. Again, we talk about making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I've never used this analogy in my entire life, so I'm not trying to beat it to death, but it's like, it's like trying to take a test, old school test in Scantron with, with a golf pencil. Well, those don't have erasers, right? And they're really short. Like, it's not primed conditions for success. Like, let's think about this. Let's really set ourselves up for success. No excuses, right? Oh man, I didn't have my gloves. Well, that's your fault. You forgot your gloves, right? Or, oh man, that's not my quarterback. Okay, well, like, line up with your quarterback or take more routes with him or whatever you have to do, right? Like, you can do more to set yourself up for better outcomes if you just think about it a little bit.
Yeah. So you as a coach, we're talking about success. We talk about development as well to get to that success, but you got to be patient. You got to be humble. Talk about develop. Is there a specific story of a kid that you recruited or you found him, you brought him in and you were able to help mentor him, or you were able just to basically big brother him from the moment that he got there? A good success story.
I was at Stanford for 1 year. I was at Michigan from 2016 to 2018. So, I didn't necessarily get a chance to see anything through to completion. There are some student athletes that would, attest to, the value of our conversations. And I still mentor 3 of the guys from the Michigan team. So obviously, had a lasting impact on some of them. But, I think to 3 brothers, the Glasgow brothers, Graham, Ryan, and Jordan, all came to University of Michigan as walk-ons, all left as scholarship players, all went to the NFL, right? I mean, there is a template there, and there is a formula for success, right? And good genetics, right? And not everyone has those necessarily, right? But they're committed to working hard. They're good players. They're disciplined. They're committed to being great. And each one of them showed up with similar circumstances, all playing different positions, O-line, D-line, safety, and all achieved success that way. So, um, it's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah. What about a kid? Have you ran into any kids that came to Michigan, Stanford, and didn't do well and had to bounce back? Did you ever
Yeah.
keep track of any of those guys?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of those guys lacked personal accountability. And sometimes it was just bad luck and misfortune. It's like a bad country Western song. Your truck broke down, your girlfriend dumped you and your dog ran away. Sometimes life can come at you that way.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't have any money in my bank account. My aunt died, and, I got a parking ticket or my car doesn't work or, and that can affect your psyche and your morale and your attitude and your commitment to what you're doing at the time, because all these other things are pulling at your attention. And so, it's about, continuing to be resilient through that and understand that your body of work is, 365 days long or longer. And that one bad day doesn't define you, right? But what can define you is your ability to work in spite of tough conditions, right? And so, yeah, there absolutely were guys that were like, yeah, I know I'm at Michigan and how valuable this degree is, but, y'all ain't giving me the playing time that I deserve, so I'm out. If you're that short-sighted, that you can't see that, having that degree and being in that environment and the success that it breeds, if you're so stubborn that you have to leave, most of the time, the people that voluntarily leave end up perpetuating the bad, the underperformance that they had or the excuse making, and they normally don't, achieve the level of success that they want. However, there are cases where, both sides agree maybe it's not a good fit. Player needs a reset. The program needs a reset, and the players go out to achieve and be successful because they find an environment that is more conducive to what that version of them needs. What 21-year-old version of you needs and what 18-year-old version of you needs might be 2 totally different things, right? Coach Harbaugh was there for the first 3 years at USD while I was there, and then the last 3 was Coach Carragher. And so anybody who was recruited by Harbaugh and built by Harbaugh was inheriting a coach who was different, right? A coach who had never played NFL quarterback, a coach who, operated with a strong compassion and love for each and every one of his players. Um, and so the messaging and the verbiage and the phrasing and the priorities were all communicated differently. And that makes it hard when you inherit a lineup or a roster that's different than, what you would have recruited maybe if you were the head coach, for the years prior. So there's that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, I think a lot of student athletes, they don't look at it from the coach's point of view when it comes to recruiting and what they're looking for these programs. I mean, they'll kind of, in a short meeting with them and their coaches or whatever, you'll kind of get a rundown, a brochure or whatever in and out the door. But I don't think that kids really understand, what it takes and what these coaches are looking for in a development. So, what are some specific things? I know we talked a little bit about, the academics and the physical side, but when a coach comes and they meet with a kid for the first time, because you're going to get a couple meetings if you're that guy. What are you looking for as a coach, right? When you walk in through the high school, you're meeting the coach, kids coming in the door, you want first impressions, right? Those are specific things you're looking for.
Yeah, you want, it's all of it. You're trying to get as much data as you can get in a short period of time. So it's handshake,
Yeah.
it's eye contact, it's appearance, hygiene, um,
Oh my God, that's such a good.
not nonverbal communication, right?
Yeah,
What's your posture like?
yeah,
Um, what's your pace? If you're walking in somewhere, are you, do you care? Are you elite in every element of your life? Like if every coach recruited a player who resembled a service academy athlete,
right.
right? They'd be elated, right? They would feel like they're getting somebody who is representing their country and their school and their family, at the highest level possible. And so there's a lot of appeal to that. But people are imperfect and it's hard to be, an 18-year-old who gives great handshakes and gives great eye contact and is super respectful and appreciative. And,
Yeah.
but there are little things that stand out, that coaches really can key in on, um, when a player is meeting with a coach. And so, it really is as simple as being a good person and, being comfortable in your own skin.
What would you say was a unique technique that you guys used in recruiting to try to get players to come to the different, Stanford and Michigan? Something that's different.
Yeah, Jack Harbaugh always said that he would, talk about the pictures on the walls in the houses of recruits, and talk about the things that are important to them, right? So I think that, that's unique. And Coach Harbaugh would do wild stuff. I think he slept over at a kid's house, just before I got there. You know, just different tactics, right? Yeah, he held a quarterback camp right before I got there and made all the quarterbacks, throw baseballs, right? Play the cutoff man, because he wanted to see how they threw, a different ball and thought that, all quarterbacks should be good baseball players. And so they were all, everybody's looking for the silver bullet, this the secret way to doing it. But, it just comes down to finding good players, developing them and getting them to the next level. And few people do it quite as well as James Joseph Harbaugh.
Yeah. What would you say was? Have you had any bad recruiting visits or encounters or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I traveled with Coach Harbaugh to a lot of his visits, and so it would be, rural
Yeah.
places. One time, I sent him on a trip to Georgia. I think he was going to recruit Aubrey Solomon, who was a defensive tackle who eventually ended up transferring to Tennessee. But he committed to us, and um, the plane company, called me in the middle of his flight and said, "Yeah, I know we told you we had a rental car for him, but we don't." And I'm like, okay, well, like, how are we going to remedy this? And they're like, oh, the mechanic is going to let him borrow his truck. So, you know, thankfully, Coach Harbaugh is, a regular guy enough to not care about that. But, um, you know, not great when you're flying somewhere that's in the middle of nowhere, Georgia, and there's no rental cars, and one of the staffers needs to help you out that way. So there are all sorts of wild stories, of just where you're going, what you're doing. The plane crews can only fly for so long, so sometimes we'd have to bring in like a second crew to fly the plane because you picked up in Detroit to start the day and you flew down to Miami and then you flew over to Texas, but you need to get back to Michigan, and so it's just all different sorts of things you never thought you'd have to consider and bring into the equation.
Have you ever seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't watched it though.
Oh my God. Anyway, they're in somewhere in the middle of Kansas and they're trying to get home for Thanksgiving. And what ended up happening is through a connection, oh yeah, so and so is going to pick us up and all this. And sure enough, they pick them up in a single cab truck. They got to sit in the back. It's freezing outside, but at least they got there. Type of. Anyway, it kind of reminds me of that kind of story. But but all right, man. Before I get you out of here, listen, I got to put you on the hot seat.
Let's do it.
All right, man. So listen. So question number one: what is tougher, catching punts/kick returns? I know you're a returner, or proposing to your wife?
Oh, for me, that's the easiest question in the history of mankind. Proposing to my wife was so much harder. Um, I mean, picking up, catching punts and kickoffs was like riding a bike. Like if you gave me an hour to prepare, I'd be in great shape that way. But I've got a big lower half, right? Strong thighs and butt, and it took me like seconds to get the box for the ring out of my pocket. It was like the hardest thing ever. Um, and so the anxiety wasn't the challenge as much of the process and the procedure was. So yeah, in that way, the proposing was much harder, and love catching punts and kicks still to this day.
All right, you being a San Diego guy, I know you didn't go to school with this guy, but or both these guys, but I want to see, who out of the two, you like the most, Chris Bryant or Joe Musgrove?
Man, that's a hard one. So, Chris Bryant, I played against in an alumni game, even though I didn't play for the baseball team, a lot of friends. So, and I've interacted with him just a little bit. And I would have gone to Grossmont High. And I've got two Joe Musgrove bobbleheads, and my son and I wore matching Joe Musgrove No Joe t-shirts to his t-ball practice yesterday. So I got to go with Joe Musgrove, even though Bryant's the USD guy. Sorry, Chris.
Question number 3. So what would you say? So what was easier or more fun? I'm sorry. What's more fun? You starting a used textbook company or store versus hanging out at Coronado?
The textbook store was a lot of work and long nights. Learned a lot of success, a lot of failures. Hanging out in Coronado is a lot of fun. So it's gotten to be a lot more expensive, but it's still a lot of fun. So I would say that would be the more fun one.
So, okay. So question 4, next question. What did you hate more, doing off season like mat drills or doing 110s versus going up that hill at USD, walking up that hill?
Yeah. They both grew on me, right? And I came to have an appreciation for how they developed me as an athlete. Um, I would just say that we had like some winter conditioning when Coach Harbaugh found out that what Facebook was, and we had guys that had posted all sorts of pictures of them drinking and going to parties and stuff, and he punished us so terribly that I'm gonna have to just, from sheer trauma, I'm gonna have to side with the mat drills 1/10. Yeah, winter conditioning is more brutal.
Oh my God. Funny thing is they tried to get me one time. I was always on time, but they tried to get me and make me roll. I don't know if you've ever rolled. Of course, that's kind of a universal punishment.
Yeah.
So the coach is like, I got him. I'm going to make you roll. I'm like, all right, sure. So he has me roll, 100 yards, 200 yards, a long way. Like he thought he was going to get me. Well, he didn't know that growing up on the Oregon coast, I worked on a fishing boat growing up. So my equilibrium's already locked for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I get up and walk off, and he's like, what is this? Because he, Tabor thought he got me. And so anyway.
Love it.
But yeah. By the way, shout out Chris Tabor. I don't know where he's at now. I know there's a lot of teams they're blocking him from getting jobs, and he was a special teams coach for the Bears and all over the place. But anyway, still coaching. Pretty good dude. Next question. Now, this is a big one. So, In-N-Out versus a Cali burrito.
I think that you can find things that are equal or better than an In-N-Out burger. I do love In-N-Out. I've got In-N-Out shirts and socks. So, In-N-Out fan for sure. But Cali burrito is not even, you can't even really stray from Southern California and get a good one. And anyone who tells me otherwise either has bad taste, or has found a unicorn. So I love me a good California burrito. There are tons of spots all over San Diego that I enjoy getting them from. So yeah, big California burrito guy. So that's where I'm siding.
What's the worst stadium you played in?
We played Menlo, which was a D3, I think, Menlo College, and they sang the national anthem to us as a team before we played them. So that was maybe my worst experience at a stadium, for sure. I was just in Hinkle Fieldhouse 2 days ago at Butler, and our lockers were in the basketball arena there. They were kind of tight and cozy, and the excuse that they use is that it's old, it's historic. No, it's just outdated, So I didn't love that, and it wasn't much of a stadium, right? It was just kind of like a bowl inside of a grass mounding. So I don't know. I don't know what was the worst, but yeah, they were more inspiring. Like Davidson was beautiful, right? They have great architecture in North Carolina. Really enjoyed that. UC Davis's last game at their field was really bad, but the new stadium that they had in 2007 was awesome. So yeah, kind of a mixed bag.
What would you say, like in the Big Ten? What would be the toughest place to play or be around?
Jump around in Wisconsin was tough at that time. They were pretty good. Ohio State obviously is a tough, fierce atmosphere. There's nothing tougher than a whiteout at Penn State. I mean, if you look at their records in those games, it's incredible. So I tell anyone, if you're into betting, just bet on Penn State in a whiteout and you'll probably win.
All right. So last question. And I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, but if you could do it again, what would be the one thing that if you could go through this whole journey again, what's one thing that you would do differently?
Yeah, work harder sooner. Just don't be preoccupied with depth chart or size or perception or anything, and just keep doing the work, right? There's some guys that come in and work really hard really early, and their results are typically really good. So just do that. That's the biggest thing, right? And really think about what you're doing, what you need to do, and then go out and do it, right? You don't need to, come up with the perfect idea, the perfect way to do it. You can build on that, but doing the work and doing that as soon as possible is, my major advice there.
Yeah. Well, listen, JT, thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And listen, all you that are watching this, listen, take this to heart. Everything that we're giving you is the $1 million information. I mean, a lot of guys, they overlook it, but it's the basics, it's the foundations, it's what you need coming up and going through the whole system and the journey of being a young student athlete. Listen, make sure, like, share, subscribe to the channel, Walk on Warrior, walk-on Warrior. Like I said, we're pushing out content every single week. Got some new videos, got a lot of good interviews. And listen, we're just coming out of the blocks with this thing. So super excited. Check us out, Instagram, Facebook, all the social media sites. And JT, did you want to go ahead and push a little bit of what you got going on with All Athlete?
Yeah, it's just a great resource for you to create your athletic resume. So put everything about yourself. We've got AI measuring tools. You can measure your height, your wingspan, your hand size, vertical jump, broad jump, some really cool stuff in there. So great way for you to showcase yourself to coaches all over the country. We've got a handful of NFL coaches on it. They don't really use it because, they've got access to all sorts of information and databases and everything all over the place, but tons of college coaches too. We're at the American Football Coaches Association convention in January. We'll be at the Final Four at the National Association of Basketball Coaches Conference. We're all over the place. We're grinding, we're shining, and continuing to get more athletes and more coaches connected for good recruiting outcomes going forward. So yeah, download the app or go to allathlete.com and see for yourself.
Love it. And also follow JT online, like he was mentioning earlier. If you guys have any questions on anything, if you're, down and need a little bit of kick in the pants, so definitely, definitely help you out with that. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Listen, hey, like I said, we're here to prepare young student athletes for next level success. And JT, I always like to end it like this, but you young student athletes that are watching, listen, it's not about me or JT. It's about you guys. Thank you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.